Hollywood. My name is Catherine Clinch, and I'm your moderator. We're going to be talking about something that is the most fascinating topic in Hollywood right now. And anyone who follows Hollywood and anyone who wants to follow it or wants to be part of it is talking about nothing else but this right now. Okay, they're talking about the strikes, but basically it's this. And the reason for the strikes is artificial intelligence. So today we have panelists who are all involved one way or another in this world at very high levels. It's going to be an exciting conversation, and I'm glad you've joined us. I want to start with Brett.
Yes.
Brett, you have been chosen by the Producers Guild as one of the top 25 visionaries, along with a couple of new guys named Ridley Scott and James Cameron. Last night, my husband and I actually watched The Lawnmower Man.
Oh, wow.
It came out. And I understand that the underlying IP was Stephen King, who obviously has a time machine, among all his other creepy stuff.
Well, none of the virtual reality stuff had anything to do with the Stephen King short story.
Oh,
The Stephen King short story is only 7 minutes in the film. It's when the lawnmower telekinetically goes after the abusive husband. That's it. Just that scene with the cops after. Everything else, virtual reality, all of that was created from whole cloth by myself and my partner, Jamil Everett, at the time.
well, very cool. That makes you much cooler then.
It's not, yeah, Stephen King had nothing to do with the VR.
I would like to know then, why did you choose to do this story then? And how did you envision the visual representation of AI versus humanity?
Well, first of all, I'm the teller of cautionary tales. All the tales I've told that are technomythology that regard immersion, virtual experience, virtual reality, avatars, like I dealt with AI avatars in Virtuosity, my film Virtuosity, where Russell Crowe plays an AI avatar that comes out of the computer through nanotechnology. I'm always telling cautionary tales because I feel we need to be very aware of the stakes and how high those stakes are in the context of human intimacy and human interaction in regards to these technologies. I think they go to a much more primal place about who we are and who we're evolving to be. And that's a great story to tell. And there's many ways of telling that story. So that's why I chose that subject matter. It's more apropos in this day right now than it ever has been before, obviously. I mean, with what's going on with AI right now, it's the most accelerated inflection point I've seen in my lifetime of any technology whatsoever. And so it's quite astonishing what's happening at the moment.
Yeah, it's really kind of come on super fast and being accepted very quickly, which is kind of scary in and of itself. The overall tone of this panel and this conversation needs to be, does AI really pose a threat to creatives? And the other possibility is it just another tool we can use? Because I've been using this for a number of years. I know some of you have. And I think that it's been a great fun tool to use. And it's helped me.
I agree. I totally agree. I think that this is a tremendous tool. And look, it's coming like a 3,000-foot tsunami. So if you're in the ocean, you better build the surfboard because that tsunami is coming. It's not going to stop. No one's going to stop AI. As a matter of fact, look, I'm totally in support of the Writers Guild and what's going on there from a strike standpoint, from the financial and business model perspectives. Them saying, and no AI or anti-AI statements is just being stupid.
But they're not.
Yeah.
But they're not. It'll relieve you to know that the Writers Guild is actually not being stupid.
Some people from there have been stupid because they've said it.
Well, yeah, but what we're striking over, what the language we're trying to get into the MBA isn't a strict prohibition of AI. It's basically, to be very reductive about a regulation of AI.
Yeah.
Setting certain rules for the use.
Yeah, it's so early, guys. This is a great discussion to have because it is so early, and to think that a regulatory aspect is going to be put in right now, I think, is a pipe dream. We need to create a structure for writing, for all the creative disciplines to have as a front end. As a matter of fact, this is something I'm working on called the Universal Character Module with all the people at the ETC, the Entertainment Technology Center at USC, which involves all the studios and everything, in order to track the provenance of ideas and to create a front end that is completely writer driven, whether it be an individual or a writer's room. And that's the way to go, as opposed to let's put regulation in place. It's going to be a battle.
Well, it is a battle. That's what the strike is. Here's the thing. I agree with you. My response to the assertion that it's too soon is to take a look back at history. When VHS tapes came out, the studios all said, "Oh, the technology is too new. It's too soon. It's too soon. We can't set residuals for those." And guess what? They set residuals and they were incredibly low. So when DVDs came out and we tried to improve that residual formula, they said, "Oh no, that technology it's too new. It's too soon to have this conversation." And then when streaming came out, guess what they said?
Yeah, but the business standpoint, I totally agree with you. I'm not talking about the business standpoint. I'm talking about a much more primal aspect of the development bed that is happening right now. It is what it is, guys. It is a 3,000-foot tsunami. Let's deal with the reality of that in our discussions, as opposed to a fantasy of how it's going to get regulated in a very specific way. But from a business standpoint and the mechanistic aspects of financing, I completely agree. I'm on that side of things.
Yeah,
I've been a writer, you know.
I'm going to jump in for a second. I think that it's yes and yes. Does it pose a threat? But of course. But is it something that we have to accept? Of course. Right. And so, you know, to your point, there's no question that you can't put it in the sand or believe it's not going to be happening. But I don't think it is too early for the writers to ask for some basic guardrails. And it doesn't mean that anybody knows how to precisely define the regulations or regulatory framework. Because
Good luck.
Let me finish 1 second, though. Let me finish my thought. So here's the thing. Nothing has moved this fast. And so if you don't start at least defining some very basic guardrails, then life will pass you by. And I've led several tech forward media companies. So like, I'm not afraid of technology, you know, and I were talking about that. Like I that's kind of what I do, you know, tech forward media stuff. But, you know, so I'll give you an example. I don't know if I'm like 100% that I believe it's right, but I think I do, which is that right now the U.S. Copyright Office doesn't award copyright protection to something that's a purely AI-driven work. So there's a guardrail, a basic guardrail that's put in place. I believe that in the, you know, there's like in the world of credits for screenwriting credits, something that's purely AI given or driven or written cannot receive a screenwriting credit right now. And so those are some, when I talk about basic guardrails, that's the kind of stuff that I think that
Wait, can I interject something? I agree with what you're saying, Peter. The idea that the federal government has placed guardrails on anything does not help me sleep at night. And that's mainly because we're a year out from women who had a right on one day for 50 years, losing it the next day. And the truth is, those copyright protections, that's basically like what the Copyright Office is saying now. In fact, you even said the keywords in your statement were right now. I worry a lot about, you know, like I said, I worry a lot about what the federal government's going to do, because when the studios and all their ilk start lobbying Congress to change the law, guess what? The copyright law is going to change.
I agree.
That's why I'm an advocate for some basic guardrails that are put in place. Look, I wrote an article. I was talking about Catherine. I write for The Wrap, and so like I do a weekly column where I talk about AI and media and stuff. And one of them was titled, "Are you Team AI or Team Human?" It doesn't. And what I mean by that is not that put your head in the sand or ignore the fact that technology is coming, but I do believe you have to make a decision, a basic fundamental decision of do you put human creativity paramount above all other things? And
it already is. It is naturally. We are the AI. The idea that artificial intelligence is artificial is the nomenclature problem that we're creating a battle within the context of the other from ourselves. It is not the other, it is ourselves. So embrace this tool all the way, because here it comes, everybody. Embrace this tool all the way, and then you can utilize it. That's the forum to actually do the battle in, not these legislative forums, because that's going to not move as fast enough.
The key word you said there was tool.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
tool is something, because there are many who advocate, who believe
Yes.
that purely AI, generative AI works can reach the kind of the divine level of human creativity, or and ultimately will surpass it, because we're so early days. And this gets back to just kind of my fundamental belief that I don't believe that's the case. And I think to a certain extent, you almost gotta believe one way or the other, because then things fall into place generally. But I want to be very clear. I'm not advocating for like precise regulation, because things are moving too fast and we're trying to figure it out.
This is one of the problems that writers have, because nobody wants to have somebody feed in, and they're using it in the conversations they're having at the Guild. Nobody wants to feed in every script Nora Ephron has ever written, with every book she's ever written and every article, and then let the machine kick out the next Nora Ephron rom-com.
Exactly.
And that's one of the problems people have, is that yes, it is us, and we're training. Those of us who have produced credits are being used to train it. But how does that adversely impact the human writer behind that training? Chris, were you trying to say something? Your mic is off.
There you go. Have the guy talk about artificial intelligence who doesn't even know how to use Zoom. This is perfect. So the thing, it already has guardrails.
Yes.
I'm in comedy, all right? So when I go to ChatGPT, no, I'm not saying this in a great way, because I also think it needs more guardrails. This is beyond what we're talking about right now, but what terrifies me is a trading system based on AI. That's like the stock market crash of 29.
Oh, 100%. That
right.
That is the greatest danger, existential danger right now, apart from maximum solar activity. But we won't talk about that.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I believe in guardrails, and there are guardrails already built into it. There are community standards already built into it. In the last model, an example I saw on Reddit today that was hilarious, which was ChatGPT solved this logarithmic equation using only swear words.
Yes.
And in the old model, it spit out the most hilarious thing I have ever read about mathematics, going through and how to solve this mathematical problem. In the new model, it's, oh, sorry, I can't swear. So it's already got guardrails in it. It has got, for comedy, it's filled with guardrails, because if you're like, write me a joke about blankety blank, it won't be funny, number one.
Exactly.
But here's the thing, the guardrails that I'm talking about more like, rather than self-proclaimed guardrails from the open AIs of the world and chat GPTs of the world, because those are going to be evolving constantly over time. Yeah. So self-induced guardrails are fundamentally different than when you make a guardrail that like defines, like the copyright example I gave before. But then of course you get into, okay, that's well and good. Let's say you define that guardrail here for the United States, but every other territory does their thing. And so, this is where the guardrail dilemma is almost intractable.
I want to take a little pivot, Sky, because I know that this is one of your fields. When a human says something false, they are called a liar. They are slandering or libeling someone. They are fake news. They're propaganda, and they are castigated relentlessly. But now, when the AI makes a mistake, it's hallucinating. It's like Grandpa's 95. It's hallucinating. And so, what I'm wondering, because I truly believe words matter, can a computer be accused of having an agenda? Because garbage in, garbage out, someone is programming it. And how do you think this is going to play out in the case law?
Well, there's no liability for an AI hallucination is the short answer.
No.
Although there have now been claims for defamation brought against AI companies because the chat GPT did hallucinate that somebody was convicted of sexual predation, which he was not terribly keen on, and that was kind of fun. The issues. I love listening to your guys' debate, and so I will tell you that the issues on the legal side is for the guardrails is the problem right now is the guardrails are totally goofball and all over the place, and Brett, I totally get it, but But there needs to be, for example, we the firm represent both the guilds and talent, and there needs to be some kind of a guardrail to protect talent in an AI world where they can just be completely recreated and put on any film that anybody wants to do, and there's got to be something to stop that. And the answer right now, the law is completely in disarray. All of the state laws all have different rules. They have different exceptions. It's riddled with holes. And there needs to be federal legislation on this. I'm about to publish an article on exactly this issue. There needs to be some uniform, clear federal legislation on right of publicity. Similarly, on the copyright issue, you've got the issue of what is being fed. You have two issues: what is being fed into the machine, and the output. And both issues are problematic. And from the Writers Guild perspective, if all their scripts get uploaded and rejiggled a little bit, is that allowed? And so
I totally agree with you 100%. But I think that the way that mechanistically works is by utilizing the AI itself as a way of tracking the provenance of ideas and the reward and value system that goes to the provenance of ideas. Because guess what? The AI is smart enough to do that. Let's take the tool and aim it back the other way. At the same time, we're using it generatively.
Yeah, I mean, there's an example of that in the music. First of all, on the guardrail side, totally agree with you. There's always a legal for anytime there's new technology, there's going to be a substantial lagging and new law and all that. And of course, the guys in Washington, the depth of knowledge is that deep, because we broad. And so defining something that makes a lot of sense is challenging in and of itself. And then you have this where it's going so fast. I mean, we're only 7 months into this, guys, with ChatGPT. Right?
It's insane. It's insane.
So, I mean, but I think your point about just that you have the legal frameworks that you're going to be writing about and putting them in place and trying, but then again, you get into all the different territorial aspects of it too. So it gets incredibly. But I'll give you an example of what you were saying, Brett, in the music side.
Yeah.
So everybody, I think a lot of us know the artist Grimes.
Yeah.
Okay. So what Grimes did is kind of doing what you're talking about, which is she's making her songs available and her voice available to fans to then be able to generate stuff. And somehow there's some way to track all that, because then she's asking for 50% of the payment that comes from that. So there are some interesting things. And Catherine, you and I were talking about another company that's doing interesting things in the Hollywood world, where it's called Lore Machine, Lore Machine.
Yeah.
And they're kind of on the bleeding edge of it. And what they're doing is that they're creating these visual storytelling from scripts that are lying dormant, things like that.
Yeah.
The way they do it, they're scraping only artists who are participating, who agree to be scraped and trained because they participate economically.
Yes.
That's what Adobe's doing with the new stuff, is they're using stuff that they have licensed.
Right.
Here's why we have to do battle with these people. The reason we have to do battle with these people, Brett, is yes, we can embrace the technology all we want, but while they're embracing the technology too, I guarantee you they're not embracing it for the benefit of writers, actors, directors.
I think, look, on the AI side for the writers, okay, here's what anytime there's a new technology, getting back to kind of the meta point that you can't put your head in the sand. So you educate yourself. It's critical for everybody in the ecosystem to do that. Experiment with it, play with it for sure. It's not going away, and then take action. I think the writers are absolutely right to take action, doing what they're doing to define basic guardrails that elevate humans over machine. I believe that that's the right thing.
Wait. Let me ask you a question. Wait, Brett, let me ask you a question.
I think that's inherent in the technology.
Brett, how do you get anybody
People disagree though.
I know they're wrong.
Brett, how do you get anybody to pay anybody for anything if they're not required by law to do it? If I make a film and I put in Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise and I make my own Mission Improbable right now,
Yes.
I can tell you that I can squeak through right now under current law, and I can do it. And I can, by the way, I can rip off the script from Mission Impossible and convert it to Mission Improbable. If there's no laws that stop me from doing that, why do you think anybody's even going to pay?
Just one thing on that note, there's something called the Human Artistry Campaign that's sprung up, and all these mega signatories to it, and it doesn't say in the sand. Their tenet number one out of like 7 tenets is we embrace new technology. We do that, but it's the Human Artistry Campaign. Ultimately, it gets to some of the issues we were talking about preserving the humanity's role in the overall process.
I'm not buying it. I mean, I walked in a circle for 100 days in 2007, and the day after the strike, they launched Hulu, and nobody knew that there was going to be a Netflix, because that was the DVD, folks, that it came in the mail, and nobody knew that that the residual everything would be navigated. I worked in cable, okay, so now streaming, there's no carriage fees. So guess guess what happens with my business? Oh, how do you feel about a robot tax?
A robot tax?
Yeah, how do you feel about a robot tax? Let's say if everybody was afraid that that truck drivers were going to be put out of business because of self-driving cars. Never happened. But they talked about, what do we do with all those people that are trained and own trucks and all that other stuff? And the fact that their wages are no longer going into the economy in forms of taxes or anything. So if you're replacing a writer with an AI,
I'm not talking about, wait, who's talking about replacing writers with AI? No,
Tiger, right now in Sun Valley, as we speak.
No, I know, but that's not what I'm doing with it.
But that's not
that's what we're talking about.
Okay, Brett, let's look at some other perspectives here, because what we're looking at is that they are looking at how to replace writers and actors. And that is the drop dead point on the negotiations right now. Marc, you started to talk about what some of the dangers are. So can you get into that a little bit more? And then I want to take it to another level with you.
Well, first, look, corporate America doesn't owe anyone any jobs, though, though Chris's point about, well, the more jobs you take away and the more jobs you obsolesce, the fewer tax dollars you're getting, the fewer bucks you're putting into the economy. But the truth is, the existential threat is that we will all become unemployed. But then I actually worry about all the things I can't anticipate. And that's to me the lesson of, it's funny, Brett had said that AI is the quickest technological revolution he's witnessed in his lifetime. And I agree with that statement, but what's particularly scary about that statement is his lifetime includes internet and social media.
Yeah.
And if there's anything that internet and social media have taught us, it is that there are consequences and pitfalls and dangers that no one, I don't care how connected you are or how smart you are, no one can predict.
No,
and it's the stuff that I can't think of is actually the stuff that keeps me up at night, to be honest with you. Let's go back a few thousand years, just a couple thousand years. We're sitting around a campfire. Catherine has just invented fire.
Yes.
And you're going, this is fucking awesome. There's light and heat. And what do we know what we can do? It's like, I've got an idea for a steam engine, and this is fantastic. Meanwhile, the rest of us are going, some fire regulations might be pretty good here. Because you know what? Dickhead over there, off in the camp by himself, he's planning on setting everyone's huts on fire.
Right, of course. Yeah.
We're not arguing with you about the benefits of AI.
I don't think anybody is denying that. Again, let's get to the Human Artistry Campaign.
Yeah.
Say that, number one, I don't think the writers are trying to reject the reality.
Some are. Some are.
But some are, but some are in anything.
Yeah,
but
sure.
At the same time, nobody, like, if we thought those developments in technology moved fast, we have no idea where it's going to be. Nobody does. I mean, when you listen to the CEO of Google and the CEO of Microsoft, they don't even know how they spit out exactly what they spit out from generative AI. And we certainly can't expect that these commercial enterprises self-regulation is going to be enough when it comes to thinking about the big picture of what can we do. So you can't get.
It's going to be a long. I agree with that. It's going to be a long process. That's
It's
all.
gonna be a long process.
The three words.
Time when the acceleration.
We can even be writers.
The three words, I'm sorry, Mark, but the three words that were like chilled me when I heard about what the company said to the actors were about AI. Just trust us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
by the way, in their defense, I'm going to take the AMPTP's side for a second, okay? In their defense,
Yeah.
Just Trust Us has worked pretty goddamn well for them.
Yes.
Just Trust Us is how we got a crappy VHS.
Yeah.
Crappy VHS residual formula, a crappy DVD residual formula, and why we had to go out on strike in 2007. Just Trust Us served them pretty well.
I want to go to a different direction because it exists. It's there. We're going to talk about the copyright and legal things in a minute. But what I want to ask you, because you are like the master of the Arrowverse and you work in comic books, you work in CW kind of shows. How are the fanboys and fangirls going to start receiving this when they revere the artists, they revere the writers, and now suddenly it's going to be coming out of AI?
Look,
I anticipate that response to be.
you'd asked earlier, like sort of what my fears are. Here's my fear that second. There's obviously the primal fear of I don't want to see writers and artists and actors and directors lose their jobs. Here's my secondary fear. My secondary fear is, look, I think we're all sort of to Peter's point. I think we're all very confident that in our lifetimes, AI is not going to get to a place where it can create art. What it can do is approximate art. It's very good at approximating. I think that's as good as it's going to get, again, at least within our lifetimes. My second biggest fear is that the public won't care or want to know the difference.
Yep.
And so the fanboys and fangirls that you mentioned, look, I think it's interesting. I mean, I've really dealt with fandom, for much, if not all of my career. I was actually, I had a comic book come out yesterday. I was interacting on Twitter with a fan about the way I killed off Spider-Man in my comic. Fans are always going to have a specific point of view on these things. I gotta say, they're such a small, teeny, tiny, almost impossible to measure percentage of the overall audience, and it's the overall audience I worry about. And like I said, I worry about, they don't, as long as it looks and sounds like art, it might as well be art to them because.
Listen, can I just say a point on that point? So the fan base concept, I think, is a really important one. Because it gets into kind of more anonymous writers versus somebody like who has a brand like a Grimes. If you have a bunch of fans, then it's kind of obvious, at least to me, it seems kind of obvious how AI, you can use it to monetize. And even if your fans pump out millions of new Grimes songs, your super fans are still going to want to hear the ones that are purely Grimes. And in fact, it's going to, in my view, I think you got to believe it's going to even elevate her completely human work more. So it can be really great for her. When you're an anonymous, let's say a writer, and you don't have like a massive fan base, it's a much more problematic situation. But I think that the fan concept is a really important one for people to think about when they're thinking about the overall framework. And then ultimately the idea, and I'm glad we brought this up, Catherine, is it's not just the economics of it all. It's just about pushing I won't even put the name human on it, creativity forward, where something is really inspired and ultimately something entirely new, not just novel. And that's something that is a meta issue that we all have to deal with, I think, just in terms of art itself and what it means to be creative.
Sky, I'd like to ask you, because you represent both the guilds and artists. We have brand identity in someone like J.J. Abrams or George R.R. Martin, and we have contracts being developed individually for them. Are there any new trends in the content in the contracts that protect these artists?
Well, all right. This is if I could sum up on this issue. One is, I totally get Brett's point. The few, it's coming. It's a wave. And what I would say is any whatever they do new, God be with them and whatever. And if they want to create new gazillion whatever, have fun. But there should be some rules, guardrails, whatever you want to call it, laws, contract that protects existing IP, existing works, whether and whether it's a person's personality, image, look, writing, their skills, whatever it is, that there should be some protection. And if the law hasn't caught up with that, then perhaps the guild agreements with the studios can fill in the gap for now. And there needs to be some level of protection for that the current law just unfortunately doesn't cover, and particularly because of the conflict between state laws and the problem with the copyright not catching up. That's all. I think we're all in agreement that there should be some protection for existing IP, right?
What's the best technology to do that tracking?
The problem is the technology is irrelevant unless I get it. I totally once there are rules, then you can have AI track it. But if there are no rules, then I can tell you no one's going to give a hoot what AI says is somebody owes money. Right?
Honest.
And it has been clearly stated by the former president of our guild during the agency strike that this industry has never merited talent as the primary reason that people move up in the food chain. And one of the concerns that we're dealing with is the next Spielberg, Coppola, Scorsese are not going to be needing to collaborate with ChatGPT, but how will they emerge as artists in and of themselves if everything here is cluttered in? So I want to go to comedy now. Chris, you've showrun tons of late night shows and comedy shows. So I'd like if you could take us through how a human writes a joke or humor and how that fits in with artificial intelligence, which is not innately funny. It didn't have a troubled childhood or any of the other reasons. So how does it become a tool that comedy writers can use or not?
Well, most late night writers or many of them, have like a background in like stand-up comedy or something like that, where they've, it's practice. It's literally like, I can't diagram like what makes a joke, because it's like taking apart something that's living and trying to put it back together. It doesn't work like that. So it's really just experience and practice and things like that. I also feel like, so anyway, there's that aspect of it, which is just, you're a practice professional. You've been trained by audiences where you're putting out your material, you're getting a response in the form of laughter. And that's what trains you to kind of move to whatever the next thing, or like, oh, this works and maybe I'll use that again or whatever. So in terms of AI or in late night, I think as a research tool, it's killer. I mean, like there are people that identify that they have like with a late night, generally there's something called a hot sheet. You come in the morning, somebody's been working since 5, 6 in the morning, putting together the news of the day and something digestible that the writers can look at, so they don't have to spend 2 hours doing research, stuff like that. That I think would be, I could see that being like, a benefit to the writers, although maybe those researchers are prompt engineers now, but they'd basically be they'd be replaced, or their skills would they'd have to become prompt engineers. In terms of, here, look, I'm gonna break it down. AI today is a hack factory. All right. Now, I'm not saying that Hollywood isn't a hack factory, or that you go down to the Comedy Store and that isn't a hack factory, but this is the purest form of a hack factory I have ever seen in my life, because there's nothing, I haven't seen a single thing that's transcendent. When I go into a room and I work with a number of writers and we have an idea that we're noodling on, it's jazz, you're moving things around and you can come up with things that are truly transcendent. Wow, I've never seen that before. And then you test it out, and then that becomes like your new thing. Like with Daniel Tosh, maybe it was web redemption. I worked on shows where we did some crazy catfishing on Tinder that we used for comedy. You know what I mean? So that was all like what was happening in the moment. And to me, those things were transcendent. And what's transcendent? Well, you know it when you see it. And I think I'm sure Marc would agree with me. So right now it's kind of a hack factory. I think what concerns me is what really concerns me is the fake news of it all. I've done ChatGPT write me jokes in the voice of Rodney Dangerfield. That was the best one, actually. It was actually okay at writing Rodney Dangerfield jokes. But I did some other comics.
I asked ChatGPT to write a script in the style of Marc Guggenheim. I'm not joking. I want to shoot myself.
Yeah.
It was not good for myself.
Makes you feel bad, right?
Actually, honestly, my next prompt was, is Marc Guggenheim a good writer?
One cautionary note on all of that. We're only 7 months in of ChatGPT.
I'm not saying it'll never be transcendent. There's super intelligence, which we should all be fucking terrified about. And I don't think that's something that we, can necessarily tame. You know what I mean? But like in terms of what it is today, it's a tool. It doesn't do anything transcendent. It's a hack factory. And it can be useful for a number of things, and including it's a super Google. It's great at research. It's not bad as a writing partner on some level. But
those are a lot of big.
Sure, I could train it. I mean, look, I could download OpenAI on my laptop and feed it 3,000 roast jokes. Do I think it's going to be a good roast writer? It'll never be better than anyone who.
Of course not. I completely agree with that, by the way.
I'm not worried about AI. I'm worried about the studios and the CEOs. Those are the people I'm worried about. And by the way, we're talking
about AI. That's what I wasn't talking about.
No, but we're talking about, again, AI is a tool, and a tool is very much dependent on whose hands it ends up in.
So let me just ask this question.
This is the guns don't kill people, people kill people argument.
No,
you know what I mean, it's like the AI is just a tool. Well, so's an AK-47.
Yeah.
And by the way, theoretically, not everyone should be able to have an AK-47. I mean, that's really fundamentally, Chris, to your point, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about, it would be nice to have some gun regulation for AI.
Yeah.
And, as simple as just the way the studios can't do business with writers who aren't members of the Writers Guild. Guess what? Neither is AI. AI is not a member of the Writers Guild. And we've got a side letter that kind of winks at that a little bit, but I would certainly sleep better at night if we had something actual.
I want to shift out of this for a minute and talk about something that's really important, which is copyright. And so this is basically to Schuyler and Peter. The studios, when we do work for hire or if they buy our spec, they have to own copyright. That's part of the sale. And for years, they have denied any participation of writers having copyright, and any kind of licensing rights have to be exclusive. So you cannot copyright anything right now that is created by an AI. So I'm looking at what is their plan. Have they planned that they're just going to go to the politicians that they've been supporting forever and say change the copyright laws? Or are they going to rely on the fact that corporations are now people? Now, I can't copyright anything that I write on AI or use AI for, or imagery, because that's what mostly I'm using. So if corporations are people, how can they do that as well? And I don't see how they're going to go around this other than literally hardballing the politicians to change the laws.
The MPAA has a remarkable lobbying success, and you can guarantee that they're right now lobbying on this precise issue.
Yeah.
Guarantee it.
Look, again, this is one where the copyright law is as it is today, but there's no way of knowing how this is going to evolve, but you can bet that the commercial enterprises out there who are creating the AI are going to be arguing that the logic there should be no distinction between intelligence, whether it's artificial or human intelligence. If something is novel and developed, then there's many today who argue that should be capable of copyright protection. So I'm not 100% convinced that the law is going to stay the way it is today, because things are moving so fast. This gets back to the fundamental point of like some basic guardrails that are tenets that are locked in without getting too deep. But that's what I think.
So let's talk about the studios now and the recent article that came out with the headline and deadline saying Hollywood studios WGA strike endgame is to let writers go broke before resuming talks in the fall. Now, the industry literally said in there, by October, the writers will be losing their houses and their apartments. And I'm thinking the subtext here seems to be Disney wants writers' children to be homeless. Because what else happened?
I mean, they actually said that.
They
By
did.
the way, the difference, do you know that I think we went on strike on May 2nd. Do you know the difference between writer incomes on May 1st and writer incomes on May 2nd?
No, what?
There was no difference. Writers were already not working. Writers were already suffering financially.
Yeah.
So the only difference, honest to God, the only difference between May 1st and May 2nd for writers is we got our steps in and we got more vitamin D. That's literally the only difference.
Yeah.
And fundamentally, I mean, honestly, I think I always say the things that the writers are striking for is actually not why the writers are striking. The writers are striking is because they're unemployed, underpaid, overworked, angry, and miserable.
Mm-hmm.
And we talk about AI and we talk about minimum room size and we talk about spam protection, but that's not what the strike is really about. And until you kind of address those fundamental core issues, there's going to continue to be a labor conflict in this town. And I think the same thing is exactly true from listening to the SAG press conference today. Same thing with the actors. They're just fundamentally unhappy.
Yeah.
So what is the
Good reason. Good reason.
Yes, for very good reason. You know, and we're talking a lot about the shingles and the side paneling, but we haven't even started to look at the foundation yet.
Yeah, because the entire business model of content has changed with streaming, and it's changed for the studios as well. So there's an entire systemic thing that has to be addressed.
Well, this was actually my problem. My biggest problem with Bob Iger's statements this morning, and Lord knows I had a lot of problems with it, was he's like, this isn't the right time. It's a time of disruption. And it's like what I heard there was, I'm sorry, we can't send a fire truck to your house that is already burning while he's holding a match and a can of gasoline.
Yeah, it was a rapacious capitalistic statement.
It really was. And I was surprised that it came from Iger.
Very surprising.
And by the way, if I'm particularly worked up on this Zoom, that's probably the reason why.
Listen,
and by the way, all that stuff I agree with.
it.
I'm just talking about AI, guys. I'm talking about technology. I'm not talking about this political shit. Believe me.
But
Well, I think this just goes to like what Marc's saying and what I was trying to say earlier. There's a fundamental distrust, and people are, looking at it like, Marc, I felt the same, but think you said something earlier that I just want to loop back on. I don't think it's better than me. I'm worried that the people that are going to hire think it's better or as good as me.
That's good. Well, by the way, it's better and as good as you for one simple reason. It's cheaper than you.
Yeah, it's free.
Cheaper, cheaper, therefore better.
This is on some level a labor issue. Like the way I'm thinking about it now is we're now in the t-shirt business. I make a t-shirt that costs $40. They'd rather go someplace where the t-shirt costs $2.
Yeah.
With a worker, and either that's labor or whatever loss.
But it's also one thing. It's up to the audience as well. It's because the audience. Let's take the disruption that came in with when the bad Napster first hit. Bad Napster brought the value of music down to zero, right? And yes, there's a lot of sturm and drang, understandably, about this modern streaming world, but ultimately the audience realized, and the people behind technology and the content business realized that if you create something that's a better experience, that people will pay.
Yeah, that was Steve Jobs.
And the audience, Steve Jobs.
He basically said, look, if you make it, cheap enough and high enough quality, someone's going to pay $1 for a high quality lossless song than they will to get it for a song that they could otherwise get for free.
Yeah.
That was the whole business.
No question about it. And then he took all the billions of the music industry over to Apple, but you can't can't blame that. But the point is that it's not just, I mean, when we're right, I think we're absolutely right to look at the, the transcendence and what art means and what art is. And it doesn't mean that generative AI art is going to be a bad thing, because it's going to be a new part of a palette. But nonetheless, I think that there is just something that as humans, we need to put a stake in the ground to elevate humanity and the creativity, because that's where I think you kind of got to believe you can't prove it. You got to believe that there's something unique that comes with human creation.
I agree with you. But to Chris's point, this is what you were talking about, Peter. This is what we need from our corporate overlords.
No, totally.
We don't need to recognize it. We need our corporate overlords to recognize it, which means their overlords on Wall Street need to recognize it.
This gets back to, though, the basic guardrails. So it is fair to ask the corporate overlords to live in a world that has some basic framework of some.
And by the way, and to Schuyler's point, we may need to force them to do it with laws, which is kind of how we used to do things in this country.
Yes, absolutely. Because we saw what happened with social media and the unadulterated just march of business models that just went on.
We've seen it happen. Like, it's not like we have to look very far back to see.
And I'm a tech guy.
Me too, by the way. I love tech. Like, I'm like a first adopter on everything. But I've seen it. Yeah, like, we're not against it at all. Again, fire good. No fire protection bad.
My first job was in software. So I'm not afraid of technology. It's more, again, I didn't mean to say I didn't mean to say, Brett, that this is a gun and that you're advocating for that. That's not what I meant to say. But I do think this is a gun. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying, from my point of view, this is a gun.
Yeah.
Well, but on that point, people still support other arts, so
it doesn't go away.
There's an expansive view of art, and it doesn't mean that because there's this new form of art necessarily. I think that it's a real threat, by the way. I think it's a real threat, but at least conceptually, it doesn't mean that the truly 100% pure human creativity, let's just go that route, isn't valued purely for itself. Like, I believe that in an increasingly AI world, I think that there could be an increased appreciation for human, like purely human, the scarcity that comes with it, and just a different level of transcendence that it's difficult to prove, but I think you got to believe.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Okay, we have to wrap up because it's that time. But I'd like to ask you if each of you could surmise and summarize what you think is going to happen a few months from now, as far as with the strike. How will it settle and which direction will it go? Will it be the studios trying to push us out bit by bit and just having the select 5% at the top stick around? Or is it going to be that we win the rights to control this as far as income and the amount that it's used? Marc, you want to go first?
I think it'll end with a compromise, as these things always do. I don't think, like with any compromise, I think, not every side is going to walk away happy. There will be, we'll meet in the middle. And how that happens is, basically, I always say the people who are in the negotiation rooms when the talks break down aren't the people who are in the room when they make the deal that ends the strike. And that was the case in 2007. I'm sure it was the case in 88, 80. It's, basically what we're lacking here is, a Lou Wasserman type figure to come in, but someone's going to have to step up. Someone's got to have, maybe it's Brian Lord. I don't know, maybe it's Joe Biden, but someone's got to step up and say that, this is it, enough is enough, fun is fun, everyone on both sides. Now it's time to come to the table and actually negotiate in good faith, because I don't think that's happened yet. I don't think that I don't think actual real roll your sleeves up and pounded out negotiations have happened either with SAG or with the WGA.
I think you're probably right. Brett, what do you think?
I agree. I totally agree with what Marc just said. I think it will end in compromise, but I think part of that compromise is to not make the technology the thing that's the big boogeyman, but actually all the other really systemic issues that are truly important for there to be, forward movement on. I mean, there's got to be a more equitable way, or the creative guilds as we know them won't exist. It's existential. So there has to be a compromise and I would say if there's a place to compromise a little bit, might be on the technology side of things.
Gang, I have to jump. I'm 5 minutes late for another Zoom. I apologize. This has been a lot of fun. Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Bye, Marc.
Guy, what's your take?
My vote is that everybody's going to follow the DGA model and kick the can down the road for 3 years. They'll use the exact same wording that's in the DGA agreement.
That's fascinating and probably correct.
Probably correct. Yeah.
I don't. That'd be interesting. You might be right, but the only way to make that work is if the strike goes really long, so that no one ever wants to do it again. And I think that's a little dangerous.
Yeah.
In terms of not making a deal right now, after what happened in 2007, I don't know that we can.
It's going to go pretty long. We're already almost there.
Yeah.
1988 was 5 months. I think this will go longer.
This is going to be longer.
Mm-hmm.
Peter?
Yeah, purely just speaking on the AI side, I think the smart thing would be to table it as well to a certain extent, like have a very high level guardrail is agreed to, and that the corporate overlords like the Igers understand that there's real fear out there, and it's understandable. Nobody knows where this is going. This is unlike any other technology. It generates itself, right?
That's right.
But it doesn't mean that the writer shouldn't embrace it. But the fear is, understandable. Nobody knows. So I think that rather than try to figure it all out for the long term, for multiple years, because it's moving so fast, do a relatively short-term deal, but with some essential protections in place.
Well, I think you're all right in one way or another. And I sincerely hope that Disney is not sitting back agreeing that writers should lose their homes so that their children will be homeless, because then there's no Disney princess purchases for Christmas. Thank you all very much. This has been a spirited, vibrant, definitely the most raised voice panel I've ever moderated. And I'm over 150 of those right now. So thank you very, very much. I appreciate your time. I hope everyone's enjoyed Digital Hollywood. See you again soon.
See you guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
I enjoyed it, everybody.